The whole idea is that just people don't want to be spoon-fed truisms anymore. People don't want to be spoon-fed cliches. Last night I worked out at 12:30 at night, and somebody goes, well, 12:30 in the morning, I guess. Somebody goes, "Oh, aren't you worried about what this is going to do to your sleep?" And I said, you know what, man? Of course, like sleep's critical, but there's some times where this just happens. And at the end of the day, I got my training in. I'm going to sleep better because of it. Where if I went to bed at 9 and I was anxious because I didn't get my training in and whatever else, I'm going to toss and turn because I have all this like anxiety in me. So I don't know, man. It just drives me nuts.
I think we're falling. People read too much about what someone who's successful does, right? Like let's take Tony Robbins for instance. Tony Robbins, the guy's worth $5 billion, whatever it is. And I actually went to one of his UPWs. Oh, was it Unleash the Power Within? I think that's what it's called. And I got a lot of good stuff out of this. This was like a decade ago. But guys, like Tony was living in a box. Like he wasn't taking cold plunges, and he wasn't sitting there drinking green tea, and he wasn't meditating every morning, and he wasn't doing this shit 30, 40 years ago. And I think what starts happening is we start losing track with the reality that you got to work hard. Like my grandfather, like when you back up and you look at, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, when he had to wake up and work at the grocery store, that his father, the fruit stand that his father owned before fucking school, and then go to school, and he wasn't playing sports. He was going back to work afterwards. He was doing what he had to do. What you did the other night with your workout, it was more about this, right? And people are like, well, you wear Oura Ring. Like, what do you do when you wake up and your HRV's down? I'm like, I work out. I'm like, I don't listen to the HRV piece of it. Like, I work for Oura. I love it. It's technology. Well, why do you wear it? I'm like, for behavioral change, for me to recognize if I eat too late or if there's ways I can improve my sleep quality, great. If I wake up the next morning and I feel like an absolute animal and I want to put my foot on the gas and then I turn around, my HRV says 40, you think I'm going easy? No, I'm not doing that. That's horseshit. I only have so much time during the week. It's a team workout. I'm meeting a group of people. I got to put my foot on the gas. I'm going to do what I have to do in the evening to recover. Maybe there's a sauna. Maybe there's a cold plunge. Maybe it's being even more cognizant of trying to get to bed earlier. There's things that I do, but sometimes you got to go against the grain. It's making me sick because people are getting so infatuated with like, I have to like the 4-hour work week. Fuck you. Like, what is this nonsense? You're reading a book about the 4-hour work week. You're trying to build a business right now. You're lucky to sleep 4 hours in a week. Like, build a business, work hard. And that's something that I think nowadays, our youth is beginning to lose a little bit. I told my son the other day, and I'm sorry to rant, Donnie, there's 2 things I want you to do. If I was to die tomorrow, there's 2 things I want you to do. And he's like, what? And he got really upset. I'm like, Donnie, I want you to work your ass off. Whatever you do, work your ass off. Baseball, it's not about you being a major league player, but when you're on the practice field, work your ass off. When you're going in for a job, work your ass off. You be the first one to show up, the last one to leave, because that's going to teach you principles in life. And Don, be an amazing person to people. That's it. I don't give a shit about anything else. If you are a beautiful human being and you have a work ethic, I honestly think you figured out like 90% of everything in life.
I would agree. I would say the only devil's advocate I have to that is it takes longer. It does, because here's what I mean. And like, we try to be as transparent about this as possible, and like feel free to disagree, but when you look at the platforms that get accelerant, and what I mean by accelerant is the ones that tend to grow fast, is even if you look at who tends to be on the Rogans or the Dak Shepherds or whatever, right? Like it's people that already have big platforms that kind of and they have a little bit of a different message. And again, positivity sells in other domains too, but I'll say this, like I have been featured on more than 200 podcasts going back to 2011. I have created 230 podcasts of my own. We've done a newsletter every single month, if not like multiple times per week since 2017. Co-written 4 books, written 1, all this, and we still haven't quote unquote made it. We're not multimillionaires, right? Like we have a growing successful business. It's me and my wife, but there's still slow months, things like that. And like that's the problem that I think people know that, yes, building relationships, doing things the right way, and just bootstrapping works, but it's also the harder route, especially if you don't have agent, publicist, representation, connections. And also, I think it's harder for people that sell simplicity. I know that our platform would have grown significantly faster if I just would have done something that I don't believe in doing. And I know you're really good about this with the people you work with too. You support them, but you don't make your name off the people you've trained. right? I don't need you to be like, these are all the people that I've trained. This is what I've done. We also could have made more money if we just went the exercise route and whatever, but we wanted to go the leadership route and communication, but that's not sexy, right? Because it's like gravity. You see the effects of gravity every day in the muscles you build and the pain that you feel when you fall, all that. And same with communication. It's invisible like gravity, but you'll feel the effects of it. And so I think some people just like, I think there's so many good folks out there that are like, you know what, man, I want to keep going, but it's too hard. It's taking me twice as long. And in the meantime, these charlatans that just pump out cliches and bullshit and clickbait are making their name faster. But like, how many people have you seen that make their name quick, but 10 years from now, they're nowhere to be found?
Yeah. And that's where I'll actually, I agree with you, but I disagree with one thing. You have not hit the finish line yet, right? So, yeah. I mean, and there's no way to really, obviously there's no way to do this, but if we took two Brett Bartholomews and we put them one more of like the fitness fluffy route, and Brett hit this level of success early on. Let's say this, you pocketed your first $1 million in your first year, and you were growing and you were making more money. And then there's the Brett who did what he was emotionally connected to, and that was leadership, business, still coaching, right? One of the better coaches that I know, you, right? And I think and this other route takes time, but then out of nowhere, you develop the stickier following, the stickier business. It's not about having 5 million followers. It's about the people who are converting and building and building and building. And at a certain point, this fluffiness starts leveling off because you're really a jack of all trades now, right? Like, think about it. Like the guy who's got, 1% body fat and, is on the cover of so-and-so might get more business because people just don't know. Brett still's built great and you're still a beast, but still, like Mike Boyle always says to me, if someone sees me on the beach and they saw a guy who is on a cover of a magazine, they're going to him, right? And we would laugh and be like, yeah, they should be going to Boyle, right? But this other area, this other sector of your business that you really have this emotional attachment to, I don't know, Brett, I don't know if and you don't know either, if in 5 years from now, you might be worth $100 million. Like, I have no idea. Like, you might scale it to a certain company. You might get brought on by this billionaire that finds incredible value in what it is that you do. And you might out of nowhere turn around 10 years from now saying, holy shit, I didn't expect that. Where the reality is if you were to back up 20 years and someone was to show you where you are now, you're saying the same thing.
Sure.
Right?
I mean, like, well, think about it. Like, to your point, like, how old are you, Don?
I just turned 45 last week.
Right. You look 25. But the point is like, I always try to tell myself or tell other people that are in like our coaching networks, like, think like you 10 to 20 years from now. And it's a joke because you can't really, you can try to, but like you can't, but they don't understand that. Like, the majority of people don't always that finish line is always moving, but you've got to, it's very much like farming. You've got to till the soil. You've got to put the process in, and yeah, you're not always going to have a great season, but at the end of the day, you just got to keep planning because that future version of you is going to be like, hey man, what advice you have for me? Well, keep going. It's the same thing with training. I'd have to imagine like your own health, your own body, like you're in incredible shape. Like, would you still agree, or would you agree in general with that whole idea, consistency beats intensity? Or do you 100%. Feel like that's what?
100%, 100%. And I try and tell people this every day. I've never met anyone, I don't know if you have, but like, have you met anyone that's just constantly been progressing day in and day out for the last 30 years? Like, I don't think it happens.
Nobody that's honest.
Yeah. And I don't think it's going to happen where like you show up every day and you're like, I feel better than I did yesterday. Oh my God, PR. There's no better feeling when you go out for that run that you were just out on and you just have that high level of energy, right? Like when you're in there and you're like, I'm present, I feel like a fucking animal. Like there's no better feeling for someone like us. Like that's really what we're striving for. For me, it's about that. It's less about the finished product. It's less about the bicep. Like that's just all an after effect of something that I truly love to do. But along the way, the one thing that I've been better at than probably 99.999% of the fitness world is that I just always find a way to be successful with this stuff, with either if it's my nutrition or it's my training. I could be showing up to the gym feeling like complete dog shit. I leave there with a level of success. And that's what separates me or someone like you from the person out there that I think is really struggling.
Then, all right, here's 2 questions for you that I'm genuinely interested in. And you can answer whichever one you want first, right? But within that, I'll put the most obvious one first. Do you feel like as you've moved out of just all you did was coach in the fitness sense, right? Now you coach in different aspects. You learn more about business. You're scaling your business. Do you believe that learning more about business and looking at that big picture view has helped you become, like, if you were just to go back into just pure coaching in the sense of like you did with clients, that you'd be better with that big picture view and more business sense? That's question number one, because we have that argument takes place in our community. There are people that are like, hey, if you're not coaching athletes every day, do you feel like you're getting worse? I'm of the belief that learning more about business and marketing and all that stuff and human behavior, even consumer behavior, has made me a better coach, even when I do step back into that. Whereas there was a break-even point of me just continually coaching more and more and more athletes wasn't helping me learn globally the same way. So that's one. Two, I know you say you make a lot of progress in the gym and you're always going to find consistency here and there, but what are the demons you still struggle with? Where in your life, if anywhere, do you still feel like, and if you don't want to use that term, that's fine,
No.
a failure? Or where do you still feel like an imposter? Where do you still feel like I'm not where I want to be?
I'm not where I want to be. I think this is a great question. I'm going to answer it honestly, but yeah, I would use the word demons, right? Because I will sometimes wake up and I will create scenarios in my head before the outcome even happens.
I do that too.
No, and I'm like, oh my God, am I fucking crazy? Like, I think I did it this morning. Like, I was in bed for an hour thinking about the outcome. It's like, dude, like, the email hasn't been sent out yet. You don't know what the response is going to be. Why are you creating this scenario in your head that is negative? Why are you putting yourself into the situation where you've almost not lost, but yeah, in a way I am losing I've lost because I've surrendered my emotions to this person. Right. That is the biggest demon that I've had in my life. And I've worked on tremendously and I've improved tremendously. And and I don't know, maybe it was because of insecurities that I had, I told you about, with a bad stuttering problem, a hearing problem when I was a young age. That's also what kind of put me into the situation that I'm in now. So when I go back and change it, absolutely not. I needed that. And I recognize now that I needed that. So to answer your question, there are these demons sometimes that it's literally like, it's like the good and the bad person in my head, and they just start battling. And, I'm learning to just try and recognize that now. I am not at the point in my life where it's like, well, stop and let's go into a quarter and breathe and drink tea and meditate. And
practice gratitude.
It's like gratitude and, oh God, think about your family, and God, like, look at you make money and your home and all this positive stuff. Like, no, I'm recognizing that I'm a little fucked up here and this is a problem and I got to continue to work on it. I'm doing the best that I can. So to answer your question, that's one. And I'm not happy to hear that you have the same thing, but it's comforting sometimes when you hear someone.
We call it an adversity drive on our personality quiz and our assessment. And it's part of stuff that I'm doing for my doctorate. We have people take a quiz and we tell them to take it in different mood states, as opposed to like the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and all that, which is like, hey, take this once and you're an ENFJ. We're like, no, you don't get to test your 3RM once, and those are the numbers you use your entire life. These things are going to be in flux. So like we have, anyway, one of the drives is an adversity drive, and it's very much tied to curiosity. People that are adversity drives they're very self-competitive. You know what I mean? They can be competitive with other people, but they tend to be very self-competitive, curious. They'll purposefully kind of put themselves in a corner sometimes to see what they can overcome, what they can come out of. And so it sounds like you got a little bit of that in you.
Oh yeah, 100%. And listen, I'm working on it, and will I ever, when I'll conquer it? I'm going to tell you when I'm going to conquer it. And I'm not being pessimistic here, but I remember my grandfather in his 80s would look at me sometimes and be like, the stuff that you thought mattered back then doesn't mean shit when you're my age now. Like, you just kind of get, and I've seen it in life, maybe certain things that I dwelled over when I was 15. Now I'm like, what was I even like? I could care less. It's like, it's like that little, kid who comes up to you and he says something to you that's really immature and you just laugh. You're like, it's a 10-year-old kid. It's like, what's the big deal? Like, but when you were 10 listening to that, you're sitting there and you're all upset, like you just grow up. That's to answer one question. And then the next question about the business piece of it is, yeah, like, I believe right now that you or me or, any of our friends that are, known in the industry, if we didn't learn one more thing in the fitness business, we would be just fine, right? Like, okay.
People are going to be taken aback by you saying that.
Well, yeah, but we would be just fine
Yeah.
It's my passion to continue to learn
Sure.
and to continue to sit with people that I know, like when I remember years ago, I contacted you about some agility help that I needed,
I still have
right?
that
And you were
program.
like, no, and you sent me a program and it was fantastic. And but again, it brings you back and it opens your eyes and then you pivot a little bit, you start diving into that. And that's what like the educational system is in our world. It's almost like training, right? Like you turn around, you're like, oh my God, you're in this powerlifting phase and you live there for maybe 5 months and you get really yoked and really strong. And then you go do a work capacity program and you're like, oh, or like you go run and you're like, oh. And it's not that you're out of shape. It's not that you forgot, you just steered away from it for a while. I feel like it's the same thing in our business. I think there's so many areas that we need to improve and be good in. And that's why I love what you're doing. I think just the simplicity of having a trainer walk into a room, getting videoed, and having to present to a group, and sitting down with the group and throwing that download on the big screen in front of everyone, and assessing how he dressed, his or her mannerisms. Maybe how many times were they going and they don't even realize it. Little things that you pick up on, and coaches just aren't. They're not thinking about that. They want to go take, FMS 10 and they want to go, sit there and maybe try and charge their clients an extra $10 an hour. It doesn't matter. It's like,
That's a golden question though, is how do you steer the industry that's so used to, like you said, FMS 10, FRC 22, or hey coach, I don't have this right now, but they bought their 30th periodization book by Medvedev. How do you get them to understand that, and we talk about this as a staff, because it's kind of a loaded question, right? And I won't we found trying to get them to understand that that's the direction they need to go, understanding the interpersonal side, the social psychology, because that's gonna permeate every area of their life. And what we found is, because early on we were like, all right, how do you get people into that? Because we took a big risk. And then what we started finding is we'd ask the people that came to our courses, and they said, you know what, man, it's pretty simple. I just got to a period where either being a director of this team or being the owner of a club later on or whatever, the harder stuff was always the people stuff. Then for a long time, I went to the training side. Early on, it was interesting. I loved it. It's what I did. I still love it. But the reality is every obstacle I came up against was the interpersonal and aspect. And eventually I couldn't ignore that. But how do you think you get that industry? Because you've always been exemplary about it. You've always been a huge supporter of things that we do. And it shows. I mean, you're amazing. You can make small talk about anything. You have a great memory. You actually listen. What would you say to other coaches that still just aren't there yet and think that yeah, I don't know, the social side I'm already pretty good at?
It's funny. I was on a vacation last week. It was like a work vacation trip, and this boxing coach came to me and wanted to pick my brain a bit. And I'm sitting there and I'm giving him some advice on what to do. And he turned around to me after and he said something that was profound. I'm still smiling about it. He said, I don't want you to think the information you're giving me is going over my head, because it's not. And I really appreciate the information that you're giving me. And I want you to know the next time you come back here and see me, and he said it in his accent, you will see improvement. And I just looked at him and I said, I know I will. And I appreciate it. He was open to that change. Most people have to just, unfortunately, they just got to hit their head on a wall enough to just say, it's like someone who's starting to feel pain in their body. They don't want it. That's a bad indicator. Things got to change. And suddenly the workouts are changing. Their approach to nutrition might be changing. And they're focusing on things a little bit differently than they were 20 years ago, right? And I feel like, unfortunately, I wish the information that you gave to everyone, they're just going to absorb it. I wish the information I gave to everyone, they're just going to absorb it. But the reality is not everyone is going to, right?
And that's a good point, because even though you look at the bigger population, think how much content you put out decade over decade, Don. Think of how many lives you've touched. Yet what percentage of the American public, let alone the world, is still sedentary?
Oh my God. Think about how many people haven't seen anything. How many people out there are struggling to build their business or build that level of communication, and they don't even know who you are.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to how you started it. And then, I know your time's valuable, so we'll have to get people, but the thing is most people, we said it in our newsletter the other day, most people wait until it's too late to look for that. And it's that whole idea of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But with relationships or their health, They wait until something is taking a hit, and now I'm going to fix it. It's the same thing with like our communication challenge, right? You have this huge fitness challenge community, and it's so great because you don't do it in this cheesy slapdicky way that everybody else does it. You bring a very like visceral reality to it. I mean, we looked at it and we're like, all right, people do fitness challenges, people do financial challenges. We're doing a communication challenge. And so every month there's some about building relationships, conflict resolution, persuasion, getting out of your own way, whatever. And the majority of the people, when we ask them, we're like, what made you do it? They're like, yo, I've already learned this lesson once. I don't want to learn it again. So I'm trying to be proactive, but it is crazy, right? We all have to humble ourselves and just know, again, it speaks back to the consistency and everything you mentioned. Man, if you don't have the willingness to do this for 10, 15, 20 years, keep wasting your own blood and being humbled every time, cut the cord.
I'm going to ask you for one favor now. I'd love to bring you on a challenger call.
Yeah.
To talk about communication, and even obviously you never come off like a salesperson, but they should hear about what it is that you do. And I think giving people these nuggets, I think is important, because in a way, and I'll close out on this, and we should honestly record this every month, because
let's do it.
It's just fun, and we'll give it to people. But I feel like it's all intertwined, right? Like it's almost ironic. It's fascinating to me how the person who has built $1 billion company, who understands systems, they can't get into, or they're struggling with their health and fitness. It's really very similar stuff. Like, we got to approach this stuff very similarly, don't we?
I mean, funny, right? The Greeks had that figured out: sound mind, sound body. Somewhere along the way, we've just forgotten it. Oh, and part of sound mind is sound relationships. And most people don't even understand themselves well enough, right? And that's why we take a social psychology approach, and you deal with that as well. Like, man, without a doubt, we're going to do this a lot. I appreciate you opening up, just being forthright. I love it. I'm here anytime you need it. And it's just good.
Done.
I'll come on yours, you come on ours. How about that? We'll figure out a date.
Done.
Hey,